Hello, everyone. Jess Clair here with the awesome Scotty McLaughlin. I'm going to introduce him in a second. We're having a very important discussion tonight. He's just going to wait till I show up on social media so that he can share it to his page. I'm going to wait for that as well. If you are on, I would love you to join into this discussion. I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on this. I'm just going to come up here, wait a couple of moments as this does come on. Did you get that, Scotty? You shared it over?
I did indeed, ma'am. Yes.
Did? Okay. If you are jumping on, please do say hello. This is an interactive, as per usual, discussion. So, yeah, please do say hello. I can only see some of the comments with your names on it. StreamYard does require you to do something to make it possible. But we're going to talk about men versus women. You know, I've always wanted to talk about this. I'm so glad I'm going to talk about this with you, Scotty. I love this shirt. I see good people. That's great. You can tell me a bit about that as well. But just as people are jumping on and saying hi, why don't you introduce yourself, what you do, the incredible work that you do around Vulnerability Australia, and also how you ended up on the Jess Clair show here with me.
Yeah. Well, we all make mistakes, right? So, So me, Scott McLaughlin, I do strategy for a living. Usually there's lots of data involved. We recently undertook a task to try to predict vulnerability in Australia, and we are deploying that particular solution to social services, people like Food Bank and so forth, to make sure Australians in need get the support and services they need. Why am I on this show? Wow. Honestly, I'm currently writing a book, and in that book, a lot of things come up for me around misguided masculinity, and I decided to, just 3 weeks ago, start a blog around that, which I've named Soften the Fuck Up. And it's really an expression of my journey, and I'm really a curious expression to see what people say about it and how people experience it, because I've had my own experience. But it's certainly not something I espouse to be an expert in, so I'm somewhat nervous sitting here talking about this. But I'm still learning, and I think that's how Jess's shows normally go. So yeah. But well, I've seen how they go too, which is why I'm frightened. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I did put men versus women, right?
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no worries. And what I do like is that when I talk about being an expert, you're an expert in your own experience, and I like to talk about that. And I like to talk about the fact that if there's anything I'm clear about, is that no one really has all the answers for everyone, but we all have an answer for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I'm really curious about that. And what I'm curious about you. And if you are jumping on or listening, please do say hello. I can see that there are some people watching. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on. My experience is when I look out there, sort of listen to some of these commentary, I hear there's a lot of women are experiencing this and women are being treated this way. And then I hear backwards, men are being treated this way and men are experiencing this, and I would just be curious if anyone else has, kind of heard this sort of like back and forth. And I kind of want that to stop, to be honest. And I'm like, I don't want to hear war cries from women anymore. I want to hear war cries from women just about their own strengths. And I definitely want to talk about the experiences that people have had that didn't work, that may have been at the hands of men, sure. But I don't like the idea that we then tarnish every man out there. And I wanted to talk about that. And vice versa with men. I don't think that I don't like the idea that, men have a bad experience with a woman and then it sort of tarnishes their whole experience of women and then they just become jerks to women, right? Mm-hmm. So So it's kind of both ways. Anyway, I've just said that. What do you want to say about that, Scott? Where shall we begin?
Oh, wow. Look, firstly, this is a journey. When you grow up in the 80s in Bris Vegas like I did, and you're involved in sport, particularly, which is a great backdrop for misguided masculinity, as I like to term it. Some people call it toxic. I think that's a little harsh, but you know, those environments and those surroundings, the objectification of women, the sort of the language, all that sort of stuff is just, it's usual, it's normal. And I guess if you grow up around that default, you know, you kind of, there's also another default in that, I had, my mother is, you know, very well educated and was very good at school, but was a stay-at-home mum and was sort of bursting to try to do something different. And I watched that as a teenage boy and saw that frustration. And I guess by the time I was sort of late 20s, you know, I had women working for me and I was having conversations like, hey, I'm not your dad. I'm not even my dad. So just chill out. I like what you do. I think you're good at it, but you know, you kind of need to just chill for me. But I feel, you know, it's not to say that I haven't been an expression of that misguidedness. I most definitely have, which is why I feel kind of free to talk about it. And it's been quite a lot of effort to peel the layers of that stuff off my personality. And I'm still working on it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. So what about that? And I just want to acknowledge, hello, Chris, hello, Gary, hello, Christy. I just want to acknowledge that what you said is misguided, toxic masculinity. Let's dig in. I just want to dig into that. What was it about that doesn't sit right with you today? And what had you kind of sit out?
I think the main thing that doesn't sit right with me is that those expressions are not genuine. You know, I've got mates who will say something that is sort of an objectification of women, and I know that that's not how they think. I know that's not what's in here. And, you know, right. I'm sort of brave enough today to call that out in myself, but actually I'll call it out with them. And they're kind of interesting conversations where I'll say, mate, well, that's not how you feel. Why are you saying that shit?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, oh, yeah, you're right. So, you know, there is a lack of awareness that we have and in our sort of, you know, in the way we relate and talk about these things. So, and same with me, you know, there'll be things that come out of my mouth and I'll go, ooh, that's not how I feel. So I think part of it's just habitual. I think the big issue, and I can only obviously speak for men, but I think the big issue for men that is just being welcomed into environments that allow for change, right? So if we bridle up against that kind of brutal masculinity, and God knows we're very good at it in Australia, which is why I called the blog Soften the Fuck Up, because it's it's a protest against this, you know, harden up blokes kind of mentality that we have. You know, I feel like in Australia that guys aren't really welcome into environments and forums, and I can tell you I experienced this, that where they can go and try to be someone different. I had the experience of going to see Brene Brown when I was young, and when I was younger, 7 years ago, and I was so excited to see her, and I got snuck into this women's breakfast so that I could see her because I wanted to learn all about this vulnerability thing. That sounded really cool to me, but I didn't have any clue how to do it. And when I walked into that breakfast, I had people going, you know, two things like, oh, you're here and you're a guy. Why are you here? Or people who were just flat out, you know, uncomfortable with me being there. So I think some of that doesn't help. I think if you tried it just last year in the workplace, I opened a lift for a woman and she said to me, I'm fine, thank you. And I said, you see, I don't think you are. Because, you know, that's pretty brutal. Like, and, you know, what am I really trying to do there? Am I trying to strip her of her power? No, I'm just trying to be like, you know, I guess courteous. And, you know, as we're brought up to be somewhat chivalrous, I'd hope we are all brought up like that.
Yeah.
But to be, you know, this is why men are so utterly confused about who the hell they're supposed to be.
Absolutely. Sorry, I just got Chris is trying to get technical training from me right now at the same time. It's like, how do I? It won't let me. I'm not sure. You might have to do it from my page, Chris, but I appreciate it. And hello, Ali. I think I want to pick up on this because it's interesting, right? Let's take away man and woman as an example. Let's insert anything. Let's insert trans. Let's insert gay. Let's insert black. Let's insert anything. White even. There is utter confusion about what to do around certain things. And the only way we're really going to work it out is if we allow each other the space to communicate, try stuff out, right?
I think there's an allowing, yeah. I think it's most definitely. I mean, it's funny. I was just saying on an interview last week, I was having a conversation with some mates of mine from baseball, and we were conversing about relationships and, certain women that were in our lives. And I'm pretty certain that the majority of women that I've met, if they had been listening into that, would be in some sort of shock, because we do talk about emotions and feelings. And at least I do with my friends. I'm not saying that's true everywhere, because it most certainly isn't. But we're comfortable talking about that stuff. And I guess I've probably led those sort of conversations with that group of guys. But not only are we comfortable doing it, but we want to. We want to talk about how we feel. And that's what I'm finding alarming. I start a blog, think, oh, this is curious, we'll see what happens. And 3 weeks later, there's a fair few eyeballs on it. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is a nerve for people that's not just, just for me, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so let's get to the core of the issue, right? Because I've always liked talking about that. Male suicide in Australia, one of the highest leading causes of death, and is the leading cause of death if you're under the age, I think, of 31?
35, I think. Yeah.
35? Okay. Yep. So when we're talking about men getting the courage to be able to come and talk about this stuff, and like you said, softening up, and you're going to Brene Brown and you actually don't feel welcome there because you're a guy.
It's not the only time that's happened. It's just one example, but it's happened a few times when I've tried to do things like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And just so we can talk about the kind of other side of this, which I can talk to, right, is there is definitely experience. I mean, I'm a very openly, as you know, lesbian woman. As you know. And I even saying that, it's like I have been in situations where I get around men and I am just sexualized or made fun of, or are you really sure? Oh, you haven't had the right guy. And do you know my experience is? I know. My experience is it's like I notice how much it's so easy to just go, oh, my God, I just write off all men. Men are just blah, right? And yeah, but then I can think I could, there were moments where I became the angry lesbian that everyone talks about, and I just yelled back and got all chaotic about it. And then I thought they would just be writing off me as an angry lesbian, right? So there's this sort of tendency to have...
We give far too much voice to the vocal minority, right? Because, the truth of what we're talking about, I don't believe there's too much opposition to. I think the opposition is in minority groups that are very, very loud about their views, whether it's man-hating or whether it's homophobia or whatever it is. There's some very small pockets of people that are having way too much voice for mine. And I think that's what the issue is. And I think, therefore, we judge broader bases of the community who don't belong to those thoughts, those ideas.
Yeah, I think you're right too. But we've all got an experience with a man, and we've all had an experience with a woman where we've actually felt victimized, violated in some way, right?
Sure.
So if that's the case, let's have a look. We're getting some cool comments here. Humanity doesn't have a duality. I do like that. Labels, I agree. Yeah. And Ali, I just came back from a family constellation weekend, and the revelations that came through from a room mostly filled with women that men have been given the chance to show their vulnerability. The facilitator, being a woman, really wanted to emphasize this. Men haven't given. Yeah, absolutely.
Great point.
And I mean, I'm curious about this myself, right?
Yeah.
Because all I see is a bunch of people just continually reacting to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you walked into the lift and this woman was like, ugh. And then it's like, well, fine, I'm not going to do that, you know? And so you go on your day, and then now you're talking about that, and she's like, oh, why do men just have to keep doing that? So it's like, who's going to go first? That's what I always come back to. Like, when
and you hear the narrative around how chivalry's lost and all that sort of stuff, and it's kind of like, well, if it's shoved up your bum, you're probably not going to do it a lot. Now, that's not true to say that sort of thing happens often, because it doesn't. But the fact that it happens creates a bit of an overture that you can carry forward if you're not careful. Yeah.
So what is that then?
What is what? Anger.
What is the overture that we're carrying forward?
I think for men, there's just a belief that, you know, we can't talk about, even to our mates. There's a lack of comfort, and there's actually a lack of tools too, to be honest. You know, a lot of guys don't know how to approach these conversations with guys. They don't, because it's kind of, we're not brought up to think that that's acceptable, that you could have feelings or, God, I've been hurt or whatever. And you can say, you know, rightfully, right? I could say to a very long-term friend who I've known for decades, oh, this girl's really hurt my feelings. You know, I'm feeling really heartbroken about that. And I'll get something back like, oh, shit, mate, that's pretty rough. You know, of which counsel is not quite getting it done for me. So, you know, there is a lack of tools. We have to call that out, right? So, but in that, we need help from women to do that. We need women in opposition, not showing us how to do the things that we'd like to do, but we don't know how to. And so the same goes with vulnerability, the way it's expressed. And I read an article just 4 weeks ago that was talking about vulnerability in Brene Brown, and there was a passage in there that was like, I think it was maybe 2 sentences at a stretch that skipped over guys like, oh, let's not talk about that because they don't do this stuff, right? And I think, yeah, you're right. We've been put in a box, and we actually need help out of that box, and that help doesn't happen in opposition. I really don't think that equality happens in opposition. That's my belief, and I'm sure some people would hate me for saying that, but I just don't think it does, and it actually creates, for men, it makes them more isolated and probably more prone to doing more of the same shit, really. Yeah.
And let's have a look at that, because women.
It's not blame. Please don't take that the wrong way. I'm not saying it's all women's fault. It's not. Not at all.
No.
Not at all. No, these habits and behaviors have been formed for generations of men with just frankly bullshit behavior. So, you know, I grew up around it. Yeah. And I'm sure my father grew up around more of it. So, you know, I think it's not, I just want to make that clear. I'm not placing blame. I'm just saying, hey, we probably need some help.
Yeah. And look, I don't, like, when I studied the feminism at uni, and when I look at the first and the second and the third waves of feminism, I was like, it was required. It was absolutely required that women started to go, this is not okay. 100% required, right? And I think it doesn't matter what group you're in, that it's actually required for people to stand up and go, it's not okay, when things aren't okay. What I'm interested in, though, is that it's also not okay to come down with the same behavior and the same, it's sort of like, I feel as though, and I'm just trying to articulate this because, of course, this is a heated topic, right? It's like, and I also don't want to be, how do I not want to be seen? Maybe I don't want to be seen. I don't care how I'm going to be seen. I'm just going to say this, and I reserve the right to take it back, okay, if it doesn't work. But it's like,
crossing fingers here, Jess.
I know. But it is. It's like, as a woman, I'm what I care about is actually human beings treating each other well. In fact, today I spent a good hour crying. I have these moments every now and then where I feel like I really take this experience of what I see out there, and that is people not treating each other well at all. And people don't listen to each other. And I see evidence of people not listening to each other, except people don't know that they're not listening to each other. And then I see evidence of men really trying hard, and then they get frustrated that they're not listened to. And then I see women trying to express themselves, and then they just get labeled a psycho bitch. And I see, you know, I see on both sides these parts where I'm like, I just wish we could take away these labels of male and female and stop labeling each other arrogant, white privileged male, stop labeling each other psycho bitch because I'm a bit frustrated, and just start to really understand each other. And that's when I went to, well, what happened when you started to really understand women? I really want to get into that because you've shared some pretty cool stuff.
I started to understand women. Wow. I understood for a very long time how to get what I wanted from women. And that I understood, and I was pretty good at that. What it took for me is I literally had a therapist call me on my shit, and I just had to own it. And some of the things she told me in the many sessions that we've done together were pretty hard to cop, I have to say. And I think I was called a predator at one point, which just shocked the shit out of me, actually. I was like, wow. Now, it is true that, you know, manipulating circumstance has been something that I have done and been pretty good at. And I think it's probably why I ended up in sales in the beginning of my career. But that is true, and I can own that. But it really did take for me to own how bad some of that form of behavior was. And I think that's the first step, and for me anyway. And that's not easy to own your shit. To sort of go, wow, that's really bad. And then really to make amends for that is just to try to live differently from there on in, yeah. More authentically.
Just picking up on that, though, it took someone calling you out, but she did it in a way that was obviously safe.
Correct. Yeah, I knew I was cared for. I knew I was absolutely cared for. But at the same time, even the words she used, she was pretty cutting with deliberately.
Yeah.
And, you know, it got in with me. And you get to that point where there's an incongruence in that between that expression and now what you know of what's in your heart. And you go, well, I can't do that shit anymore. I just can't do that shit. I have to show up like me. And for me to show up like me, that stuff's not okay. It's just not okay anymore. And so that was my experience with it. And, you know, I think I'm still a work in progress. I'm not, you know, doing a TED talk about it or anything, but and truly, you know, the blog I started, I really just wanted to start a conversation that I haven't seen for me. And if I'm going to be really honest here about the things that I've observed and just tell you from my sort of alpha male perspective about a lot of things that occur in masculinity or commentary around masculinity, it's either the guy who got picked on at school and hates that alpha expression because he resents it, yeah, and he wants men to change so that no men has to go through the bullying piece. And I'm not to say that that's illegitimate; it's a legitimate claim. Or you've got some guy who's done like 30 years of time and killed a whole bunch of people and finally broke one day because, you know, he's took himself to the edge of evil, I guess. Now, the truth of the matter is most men are in the middle somewhere. And that bothered me. It bothered me that there was no real message for those guys to latch onto. I made the team. I got the girls. I was that guy. And I did that shit behavior too. And, you know, that manipulation, I did all those things. And so I felt like there wasn't a dude with my kind of pedigree that was saying it. And saying it in a way, even with the kind of potty-mouthed expressions that I use often, that was I guess, going to attract guys to the table to actually have the conversation. Yeah. So if I had been here, you know, strung up in a pair of yoga pants, it probably wouldn't have fucking worked. And I just don't think it would work, right? So, yeah, anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Well, what was that like for you, though, that whole experience when, you know, you're acting a particular way and then this lady calls you out? You know, what was it like for you when you suddenly had that realization? What changed in your life when that happened?
Firstly, it was extremely upsetting. It was extremely upsetting to see myself as being evil. Yeah, that was really upsetting. And, you know, it's probably a bit harsh. I mean, there's a great book. If people listening to this have not read it, there's a great book by Eric Fromm called The Heart of a Man. And it talks about this oscillation between good and evil in men. And it's a good read. And, you know, it's somewhat post-war driven. So, you know, reader, be careful. But still, it's a good read because it asks some good questions about, is man genuinely evil or good? And I believe that people are good. All people are good, men and women, and at their default position. And I think we learn to be evil to cope. We learn to do things that are shit to get us through life because we don't know what else to do. And that's what I think the truth is. So, yeah, but again, I feel like the space has to be safe, as you said, and the conversation has to be in the right dialect. You know, I can't say to a bunch of, I can't rock up to baseball and go, hey, boys, why don't we hold hands and just like, and start humming, and you're like, what? Like, I'll say stuff like, tonight I was at baseball training, like, yeah, I've got it fucking live on Facebook. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I'm talking about this stuff, and he's hoping I don't say something really epically stupid. Yeah. Because that's how I relate to my guys. That's, you know, that's how we talk. So even though they're like, oh, what's it on? I'm like, she's put men versus women. I'm going to die. You know, but and any of your boys, if you're on the call, g'day. It has to be in our language. Yeah, it has to be in our language, and it has to be recognised that we need to be taken on a journey, and it is a journey. For me personally, it's 5 years of CBT every fortnight. It's something I'm solidly committed to. It's something that I want to keep doing because I keep getting results from. I keep becoming a better version of me. I have an 11-year-old daughter. That's super, super important to me, and it's super important that the example I show her not only of what a man is, but what she should and what she should therefore expect from a man if she does decide to be straight. Sorry, Mum, if you're watching. She does decide to be straight.
I like what you did there.
Yeah. Well, and it's true. I don't try to corner her in that regard. I do want her to have an example of a man, but equally, I want her to have an example of how women are treated and should be treated. And I think that's super bloody important to me. Even dating, I'm really highly aware that, you know, I might be getting, you know, 11-7 messages from people. Believe it or not, there's lots of people who are visually impaired, I guess. But the truth is that, you know, I explained to her, you know, that I'm being really selective because I am about what kind of woman walks into our world, and I am genuinely being selective. And I have to, but I go out of my way to explain that to her because I don't want her to sort of start believing in the bullshit that's on television, and that what you do in the world is you just rock up and there's sort of 18 people and you just pick one, like Bachelor or Bachelorette, which is just kids up for a fall, like in terms of that expectation, and it continues that bullshit. So these are my thoughts. Yes.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I was just listening to you going, you know, what? It's interesting. I've just recently distinguished for myself that I made some decision very early on. My dad worked away a lot. His wife, you know, my stepmom sometimes listens to this. So if you're watching, Heather knows, she knows this. My family and I talk about this quite openly. But he worked away a lot when I was very young. And I always felt very distant to men. I was very mad at my dad for not being around. But I also realized that as a young kid, I made something up about him. I had this situation where my dad, he said, "What do you want me to buy you?" And I said, because he went away, and I said, "I really want a lollipop." And I had in my head that there was going to be one of those big, ginormous lollipops. And he came back after 6 weeks and he gave me like a Chupa Chup. And in that moment, I decided he didn't care about me.
Wow.
Even though he'd actually given me what I asked for.
Mm-hmm.
And then him being away gave me more evidence that he didn't care about me. So even as a young child, I made this story up about my dad. And then that put distance between me and men my whole life. It really did. I really don't know why I ended up with women. I'm not even going to. I don't know. I like cheese as well. Like, who knows? I'm not going into the psychology of that. I don't think it's got anything to do with it. I don't, because I equally had issues with my mum. But I'm just saying that put distance between me and men. I never felt safe with men. I always felt that they were really absent. They were never really present with me. But that all really stemmed from my relationship with my dad. When I was 33 years old, I finally did my own work on it. Because none of my relationships were working. Right? And what I saw was that when I was really young, at 5 years old, I made a decision that he didn't care about me. And then all of that played out for the rest of my life, right? With men and all of that. And when I told him about it and I was like, I made this up. Funny thing was that year he bought me like 5 of these giant lollipops and sent it to me for Christmas. It was so cute. And I got to have a relationship with him. Now, he's still the same guy, you know? He's still different to me. I'm very out there and he thinks I'm crazy doing all this stuff online, you know, but at the same time, absolutely loves me, right? And I guess the reason I'm sharing this is because sometimes the distance that we're putting between each other actually comes from one moment.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it can come from many. And I think for me, it came from many moments. And certainly one that I could share is that, as a simple example, because it's kind of stereotypical, I was very much besotted with this girl that went to the school across the road from me. And I was, I think 14 or 15, something like that. And maybe 14. And it was her birthday coming up. And I worked in a jeweler's and I kind of, knew about jewelry and I bought her this beautiful stuff. I can't remember what I bought her, but I bought this stuff, right? And it was a big deal for me at that time. And I went to her birthday party and it was kind of unwelcome. And I was like seriously humiliated. Not overtly by her. I don't think she was unkind or anything, but I felt completely rejected. And I think that had a huge impact on me in terms of feeling safe with women in relationships particularly. And I think that's a kind of typical moment in the, a defining moment that you're talking about where, all of a sudden that you feel that lack of safety with the opposite sex and you start to become a very different expression, which is based on all the stuff you put around you to protect you from that harm. And I think that is, for many people, I'm sure there are many stories that they could relate to that do exactly the same thing. So I think firstly we have to recognize what it is that got in the first place to do the damage in terms of what altered our expression outward from there on in. And I think that lack of trust for me is in my own safety with women was probably why I sort of started, or one of the reasons why I started to manipulate outcomes for my own gain, because it also distanced me emotionally from that woman. It gave me distance from her. It gave me distance from her because I had control, and it gave me distance from her because I was sort of orchestrating the whole thing and working it out just the way I wanted it, that I could take it or leave it going forward. So that somehow was a pretty awkward and awful expression of safety or a desire for safety. So I think, yeah, that's my example. I mean, there's plenty plenty more where that came from, I can assure you. Some of which will probably be written in written form, but
one decision can make 1,000 assumptions. And I'm going to share my assertion on this, right? From everything that I've done now, I've done professional, personal development. I've done my own CBT as well. I've gone and done inner child healings, shamanic retreats, body work, breath work, all sorts of things. And from all of that, what I'm clear about is that all of this always comes back to one originating incident. There's always an originating incident, and then an incident that then, like Ali's put here, that one decision that's made in this originating incident then gathers evidence over time.
That's right.
Yeah.
In its own story, though.
Sorry?
In its own story.
So it like gathers, and it's almost like the brain gets put to work. It's like, it's like incident occurs, and then there's this decision made, which is actually quite, the decision that's made is quite intentional in a way. And then in that moment, the brain's like, great, now we've got information. Let's go find all the evidence out there that it's true, right? And then we come across each other and we call it black, we call it white, we call it this, we call it that. We call it male, we call it female, we call it misogyny, we call it misandry, we call it whatever we call it. But all of this originates back to one thing in the past. So what I'm suggesting is that if we want to make a difference to any of this, I really, really firmly believe that if we want to make a difference to men's issues, if I want to make a difference to men's issues, I got to go back and check those sources out and see where I'm not fully okay with men in those originating incidents. If you want to make a difference to women, you've got to go back and look at those originating incidents for yourself. I really believe. What do you think?
And you look. Here's what it's funny. I had this conversation with a guy from baseball tonight at training, and I was talking about how many women struggle sexually, and the reasons for that, the root causes for that, and how it's kind of like there are phases of vulnerability that a woman needs to go through, phases of safety that a woman needs to go through to really start to feel free to accept herself. A lot of that's rooted in the premise that, a lot of men have grown up with the whole Madonna and the whore complex. I want to marry Madonna and I want to go to bed with the whore. That's what it's certainly in the 80s, that's the kind of configuration that you were given. And that configuration plays out for women because it says, I can't be that person because I'll be judged like this. And if I show up like that or ask for what I want and it makes me look like, slutty or whatever, I will be judged. I'll be put in a box and I don't feel safe to do that. So I'm just reading the comment. And I think, and I was just, we're having this chat and I said to him, I think, what there is to do is to be really patient and continue to show up consistently for your partner to make sure that she understands that you truly do accept her for you. But you need to just be patient with that as a process because she's got all the hallmarks of that stuff that she's grown up with. Now, and in today's generation, there's a guy coaching, I don't coach anyone, I mentor. I don't have the patience to coach people, but there's a young guy I'm mentoring at the moment. He's 22. And I said to him, how does porn culture play out like for you guys? And is it a bad thing or what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it influences the way girls are with you? How does that work? And he says to me, the amount of times I found myself going, why are you doing that? Like, why don't you just be with me? This isn't a porn film. We're trying to relate. And he goes, it really makes me feel. Now, I don't know whether he's an outlier, but his expression was the frustration that, being intimate with somebody was like some replication of porn. And, I think there's a different kind of issue in that disorientated expression in younger generations than there is in old dudes like me. But still the issues are still, you know, very much causing the same problematic outcomes for people. So I think there's not enough conversations about that. I know as a father.
Come on, keep having them with me.
Yeah. That's that, right? Yeah, as a father of an 11-year-old daughter, it scares the shit out of me. Porn culture scares the shit out of me. It really does. I think.
Sorry, you go.
I even see like just how, you know, how young girls, teenagers dress, get around, suggestive, that sort of stuff. And I'm trying not to be judgy there, because I always have to be mindful that I was brought up with that whole Madonna and the whore complex, right? So I have to be very careful that I'm not judging there and going, my God, girl, put some clothes on. But I'm not sure that that's a genuine expression of those kids. I'm not sure it's a genuine expression of who they are, or whether it's in fact who they think they should be, which is, again, the very same issue that makes blokes in the 80s beer swilling, swearing, objectification, like objectifying dudes, right? Because that's what people expect me to be. And I wonder whether, you know, isn't it the same thing through the younger generations, that we're trying to show up as we think others want us to do so? And I think for me, in my life, I just got to the point where I'm like, this shit's not working for me. I need to do something about it. And I had some really big systemic issues in my thinking when it came to relating to women, particularly when it came to trying to control situations so that I felt safe, so that I didn't feel like I was going to be hurt. When that came up really loudly for me, I was like, okay, dude, you need to cut yourself off and go and see somebody, because this shit's wrong. It's just wrong. So I just broke, I guess. I was too many years on the planet doing one model that just didn't work for me. So, and wasn't giving me the sort of relationships that I wanted. So, and ironically, you know, early on when I discovered Brene Brown, and I do want to call this out, I watched her TED Talk, was it 10 years ago now? And I went, oh, wow, that's so cool. I'm just reading this comment. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I thought it was really cool. But I also want to say that I've always talked about people like Brene Brown as being like a beacon of hope. And I call her a beacon of hope because it's wonderful the things she's saying, but there's an awful lot of us, I'll just say there's an awful lot of us guys anyway, that are sitting here in our little dinghies in the dark going, I can see the light, I just don't know how to get there. I've got no idea how to put the oar in and which way to row in order to get to that place. I'd like to be there, but how do I do it? And I feel like that journey from being, you know, stranded in that little boat to try to get to that lighthouse of energy that she talks about in vulnerability and connection is a journey that needs some guidance, and it's something that takes, you know, some real big steps, and it's something that people struggle with. And in my partner at the time, when I wanted to do that work and I was all enthusiastic about vulnerability and I really wanted to bring it to our relationship, she was like, oh, I'm not fucking interested. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll be outside having a beer then.
Well, so I really get this, right? Firstly, I have an assumption that everyone doesn't have great sex. I'm just going to put it out there. At times. And I'm not saying that we don't have good sex. I'm saying that, like, Sky's going to pull me up on this. I sometimes make mass generalizations, but, you know, generalization alert, Sky. Not to say that I've slept with a lot of people. I've just talked to a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people, as you can hear, about a lot of issues. And one of the things that is common that I see is that to actually have really vulnerable sex, to actually be with someone vulnerably in a sexual nature is fucking confronting.
It is.
In fact, it's so the intimacy that is required and the kind of like pulling yourself out of tuning out is quite intense. Right?
Very intense. And it's actually very emotional too. And
very,
you know, I've certainly had situations where we've both been in tears because of exactly what you're talking about. It's We're just so not used to being that seen. I want to just touch on Sky's comment. I get that conflict, by the way, around your teenage girl. I mean, we want our kids to be genuine expressions of themselves. And I think that's really important. But at the same time, we have to alert them to the dangers. You know, I try to explain to my little girl who wants to be a little independent and ride a push bike to school. And I'm like, hey, you're 32 kilos. Someone could stick you in a backpack. I'm sorry, I'm tracking you. Here's a phone. I'll be watching where you are. And them's the rules, and that's how it goes. But I think what Sky's saying is a really important point, because it's so important that our kids are taught to be genuine expressions of themselves. It's just a little bit hard to believe that the level of flesh bearing that goes on in current generations isn't seriously influenced by porn culture. It's very hard to believe that. Sure, there's fashion and that evolves and changes, but it doesn't appear to be a cycle of fashion where there's more clothes being put on, from what I can observe. So,
I know what you're saying. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I worry about this with my daughter. My daughter's only 6, and all I've noticed with her is that, you know, one day I stuffed up her Halloween face painting and she couldn't go to school until I fixed it. Like, she would not be seen at school. But maybe that's just, hey.
You lose that. I know. I'm not allowed to do buns on competition days at gymnastics. Let me tell you,
I totally screwed it. But
NQR.
But I think the thing that is, she starts wearing makeup, but she's wearing makeup because she wants to be like me. When I asked her that, I was like, "Why are you putting makeup on?" She's like, "Well, you wear makeup." You know, and she kind of sneaks it and puts on eyeshadow, and, you know, you'll see some of my photos, even that Christmas photo I put up, and you know, she's like got her eyes like covered in eyeshadow. It looks totally cute. However, she asked me, "Why do you wear makeup, Mum?" And I can't even answer her. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just do. I wear it because it's what you do. Yeah, and I do feel more beautiful when I put it on, so I wear it, right? And at some point, I go, I don't want her to think she's more beautiful with makeup. Like, I get into that dilemma, right? So I do grapple with that. But at some point, I went, whatever I feel more beautiful in, I'm going to do anyway. So
this is where these things bother me, because I actually think I look better in glasses, but I don't wear glasses here because I'm short-sighted. And if I'm sitting in front of the computer, I can't read the comments while I got my glasses on. But see, and then I've got glare from lights and stuff like that, so it doesn't work.
Totally.
But gee, that's convincing, Jess. Really convincing. Anyway, yeah, I think you're right, Sky. It's very, very fair to say that. I think you know, my daughter sort of goes and gravitates towards things like that too, looking after her skin and all that sort of stuff, and I think that's kind of cool. What worries me, I guess, is, you know, how much attention she goes to. Like, the hair can become now a sort of 25-minute, half an hour ordeal. And I wonder, by the time we get to high school, will she have to get up at 3 a.m. in the morning to get there? I'm not sure, but I can see that she's really starting to become self-conscious about herself and how she looks. So there's a balancing act between me allowing her to be herself, but also and ensuring that I'm not criticizing her for, oh, I've got all these pimples, and I'm like, you're going to get those, and it's okay. If you don't touch them though, you'll do damage, and do this, and try to educate her along that, but also educate her in the acceptance that, hey, your body's changing and things are happening, right? So it's a tough tussle as a parent, that's for sure.
I don't think there are any answers. I think
gravitate towards midriff tops too, but she's a fit little kid who's, you know, from gymnastics. She's got kind of a washboard stomach. I'm like, gee whiz, if I had a washboard stomach when I was 11, I probably would have bought a midriff top too. But you know, but again, I've got sort of one eye on that to go, well, what does it mean and who's it influenced by?
I know, it's hard to know. And I don't even know how we got onto this topic, going from men to women to now children and how they're dressed. But I think it went somehow porn culture and, you know, being concerned about our children. But I want to go back.
Children should be your motivation for actually being a better person.
Yeah.
Right? And I think my daughter is most definitely my core motivation for trying to be a better person, and for ensuring that the way I am and the way I am in relationships with women are something that she would, be fond of, right? So I think it's very pertinent that kids are a part of this conversation, because I think many people, first step in this change stuff for me was awareness, and the second bit is what's your purpose? And my purpose was to show up differently from a kid.
Yeah. So it was your children that influenced how you began to show up?
She influenced me even wanting to do the work in the first place.
Yeah, wow. I think that's beautiful, is it? So would you say it took something, and I think I've mentioned this before, it always takes something outside yourself sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know about always, but I try not to say always. But I think it's funny because I work in the game of certainty during the day and, forecasting and predicting things. But I think when it comes to matters of the heart, I think it's a squirrely mess. It's quite, humans are complicated, and our feelings and thoughts are complicated. So I'm not sure. I mean, I think that it was that way for me. I was also in a relationship that I cared very deeply about, and I wanted to change for it. I wanted to show up differently for it. But the ongoing continuation of that expression is most definitely down to my daughter, who's been the consistency, or the consistent element.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, Scott.
Yes, Jess.
We are just about to end, and we've got a couple more minutes. Hey, I'm breaking up with me. I am. And where do we want to end on? I do. Where do I want to end on this? Where do we want to end on this? So we started off by going men versus women, right? And what happened?
I'd be really keen to know from people, whether it's in these comments or any subsequent comments from anyone who watches the recording of this, just to understand whether we're right about this conversation and the essence and its importance. Jess and I agree pretty vigorously on that, which is why the opposition thing was interesting, because we do agree on this stuff a lot. And I think that I'd be interested to hear from others. And again, that was the whole purpose of my blog. Put it out there and see what people say and how they react. And I'll tell you the difference I found is I now have more male friends calling me about things like relationships. And, that's good because it gives me an opportunity to share stuff and to be there for them in a way that they really want to, be held, I suppose, in that space.
Yeah.
So
beautiful. And if people do want to follow your blog, is it I am Scotty Mac?
Oh, no, iamscottym.com. iamscottym.com or softenthefuckup.com. They'll both lead you to the same place. So
softenthefuckup.com or iamscottym.
Yeah.
Yes. Is that the same place where I book time in with you? Is that the same?
No, that's scotttime.com.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And now everyone's booking time with you.
Go on then. Lift, Jess, lift.
Yes. Well, there are so many things that I could probably go into this. I think I just want to end on saying, just as I asserted in the beginning, that I just want to do away with this men versus women thing and just look at,
Agreed.
How do we communicate and create safe spaces for each other?
From people about what it is that they're looking for, what it is that they'd like to see. I mean, geez, Jess, is there a space for us to do sort of active workshops on this stuff and, bring people to bigger conversations that are just not between you and me, but between others about this stuff, but with a beginning narrative that says that we shouldn't be in opposition here.
Definitely not. Definitely not. And I want to start to open this up. So you said, do we have an answer? No, I don't. And I'm asserting no other mofo on the planet does either. Or we wouldn't be in the situation we are. I don't think that there is an answer for everyone all the time. I think it's a constant exploration of what makes a difference to people. Mm-hmm. So anyone has any comments on here, I would love to hear your comments. Is there anything you want to say before we end, Scotty?
I'm all good. Thanks for having me, Jess. And I'm sure it's
welcome.
The first of a few, I think, by the feel of it.
Yes, I love having these discussions and getting more into the crux. We'll have to get. I didn't get right into the raw, real, like down to the core.
The really ugly stuff you like to go.
Yeah, I like to get into that. We'll have to do that next time. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's probably me just being safe. It was, first rodeo and all,
Yeah, that's right. But thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for the work that you do. For those that don't know, Scotty was on. What news channel were you on just recently?
7:30 report. Yeah.
We're on the 7:30 report and has done a whole lot of data demonstrating, just the impact of COVID and what it has had in terms of the financial situation and vulnerability in the sense of financial vulnerability and health vulnerability. So that's right.
Be gentle with me, Strike. Be gentle.
Yes, that's right. So that's what he does by day, and by night he likes to have these conversations, soften the fuck up, and really make a difference to men and men's experience of themselves in life. So I appreciate the work that you do, Scotty. Look forward to seeing more of it. And yeah, you're welcome. And thank you everyone who tuned in.
Thanks, guys.
Chris, Guy, Ali, anyone else that is still on that has been listening but is no longer here. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, have a lovely evening.
See ya.